your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we have a very special guest on the program today to share her story, actually, having to do with an independent free spirit who married the son of a Saudi Arab sheikh, or sheikh, I will get the pronunciation, and watched her fairy tale romance basically turn into a nightmare. Patricia Bonis, my guest, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us your story of, I love the title, JEDDAH Bride. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Richard, for having me on your show, and I'm grateful for your interest in JEDDAH Bride, and I'm anxious to talk about it.
Well, you know, it's interesting that we have gone through a lot of different iterations, if you will, when it comes to the framework, if you will, for the relationships in general. I mean, we have the stereotypes. We see them on TV, and they are not correct. And yet, I know there are some relationships that are like that, where they're competing factions. One is trying to get one up on the other. Or you have the strong macho type that, you know, if they're in trouble, they won't accept help because we don't accept charity. You know. Well, we do it for ourselves. And then there are others who are open and they're there for others. You know, when a disaster strikes, like here in California, we just had the wildfires. We've had floods, we've had fires and earthquakes, and the list goes on. And people come out of the woodwork to help. During the pandemic, it was the same thing. We also have all kinds of other iterations. What were you looking for in, shall we say, a marriage relationship prior to marrying or even meeting the son of a sheik? Or is it sheik or sheikh?
It's both.
Okay.
It's one of those words, potato.
Okay.
You can choose, but I say sheikh.
Okay.
Because I think it sounds better. So, what was I looking for? Okay, let me start by giving a little brief introduction about myself.
Okay.
I grew up as a normal American girl in a beach town in Long Island called Sands Point, and all summer long I'd be on sailboats and Boston whalers, water skiing all summer, and my parents were Italian American background, 3rd generation. And I went to public school in the town of Port Washington, and I never met an Arab or or even a foreigner, except when I traveled. And then they weren't foreigners; they were inhabitants of their own country. So I was in college in Boston. I was just turned 18, freshman year, and I met a man, a student, a fellow student. He was a little older than me, but he was from Saudi Arabia. He drove up in this fancy sports car. And mind you, I wasn't really into money and glamour. I think I was too young to even understand the meaning of what you do with money. I was just wanting to have fun and go to discos and be out every night. And, that's what I was looking for, like excitement. So I
Hmm.
saw this guy drive up and he was like very exciting looking. He was exotic. He was very sophisticated. He had a British accent. And I kind of started like falling in love with him. And he liked me too. So we started to date. And it was a better date than I could get from an American guy. Okay, American guys at the time. College. They'd invite you out and you'd walk around the streets of Harvard Square. I was at Wellesley. I dated a lot of guys from MIT, Harvard, BU. You'd walk around the streets and you'd go to a bar and you'd stand there, and that was your date. Like they didn't even take you to dinner. Not that I
Hmm.
cared. I was so skinny. I never ate. All I wanted to do was dance. But this guy had the fancy car. He'd pick me up at the school. A lot of guys didn't even have cars in college. So he'd pick me up. He'd take me to a good restaurant, treat me really well, and take me to a fancy disco, get bottle service. We're on, it was like a whole nother world. And I thought I was a grown up. I thought I'd graduated to the new world. And that helped fall even more in love. And of course, being from a conservative Italian American Catholic family, there was no way I was going to not get married in my life. I
Hmm.
just never even considered the idea that I would not be married. That's called an old maid in the old days.
I
That's what
remember the term.
I'm trying to give you culture. This is what it was, a spinster or an old maid. It just was. And I hated it. I'm not saying I condoned it. I was a rebel. I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to have to follow the rules. And my iteration of not following the rules was to run off with the Saudi Arabian and marry him out of my culture, out of my religion, and just kind of thumb my nose at the traditional stuff that people were doing. And that's what kind of why I did it. I thought I was being bold and free, and which is absolutely absurd when you think about how restricted Saudi Arabia is. But I figured I could just do my own thing there. I had been doing my own thing and rebelling. And so that's sort of what was in my mind as an 18-year-old meeting this guy. Okay. So
Hmm.
did I frame it? Like, yeah.
You were looking for something that was there, but not really. And I have to wonder sometimes, did you ever, I mean, there obviously, I'm curious, did there ever come a time prior to this relationship, prior to this marriage, where you maybe stopped and said, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe this isn't quite what I want," or were you so into the that aspect of I just want to dance, that it never crossed your mind until the after the fact?
Yes, that's exactly right. I thought I'd be nightclubbing it and jet setting it around the world for eternity. I didn't even
Mm.
think about having children. I didn't even have any interest in that. I just wanted to, and I couldn't live with a guy. My parents would disown me. So I
Mm.
had to get married if I was going to be with somebody and travel around and, do this get jet set life. And I just thought we'd have a jet set life for a good amount of time. And then suddenly I realized he had to go back to work and be in Saudi Arabia. And I figured I'd met a lot of his friends from Saudi. I'd met a lot of the foreign women, English, Spanish, French, that had married Saudis, his friends. And they were all so cool. And I met them in Regine's in Paris in the nightclub, or I'd meet them in some cool nightclub in Rome, or, London, Annabelle's in London. And I just thought, this is going to be my life. And I liked it. I liked it. I didn't even give Saudi Arabia a second thought. I really didn't. And
Mm.
that was crazy. But people keep saying, didn't you see the red flags? I could tell you, no. Red flags didn't scare me. I just pushed them aside or something.
Mm.
Yeah, that's who I was. Very impulsive, very headstrong.
Mm. There are a lot of women like you who are very headstrong. They have goals, they have aspirations, dreams, desires, etc., etc. And they don't let anybody get in their way, even if they have a partner or a husband or wife, whatever the case might be. And it's just very interesting that our society has been what you experienced in a very intense way, very patriarchal. You know, men made the rules. It's one of the reasons why I kind of like the family I grew up in. I had five females, four sisters and a mother, and it was just me, my brother, and my father. I don't want to say that it was a matriarchal system, if you will, or arrangement per se. What I do know is that it taught me an awful lot about women, my sisters, my mother, and so forth, and my father and the way he treated her, which was very, very good. Did he open the door for her when, at the car or this, that? You betcha. And so do I. It's just
Wow.
something that I took up, and chivalry isn't dead. I refer to it more as just being kind, just being kind, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if she opens the door for me, I thank you, that kind of thing. What about the depths of the patriarchy uh, in this relationship with this family in Saudi Arabia? Because I know that people in Saudi Arabia, women in particular, if I'm correct, they don't really have a whole lot of rights. Can they drive yet? I know that there was a big upheaval some years ago. What was it? The Arab Spring, I guess they called it. And women were trying to get rights to drive and do this and do that and the other. And in this country, of course, unfortunately, it seems as though the rights of women have kind of gone backwards in the last 10 years, 10 or 20 years. But what about you in that relationship there? Did you start wondering, "Yeah, I would rather go back to the States," or did you live here and so forth? How did that all done? What was the dynamic there?
Okay, so the dynamic was that I grew up in a family where my dad was the boss.
Hmm.
But my mom was a very strong character, very strong lady, and she fought a lot and got her way half the time. So I thought, okay, I'm strong. I'll fight. I'll get my way half the time. I never worried about that. My dad was so good to me. I loved him. I like men. I'm very comfortable with men. I'm very comfortable with women. I like everyone. So I wasn't worried when I went in there. And I realized very quickly that this was a crazy setup. The women, number one, were not allowed to work. Number two, did not do anything like earn money or even work or clean or do anything in the house. They didn't cook. They didn't do anything. They had chauffeurs driving them around. They had chefs cooking for them. They had
Mm.
servants going to the grocery store. All they did was give orders and then be quiet, and the husband made all the decisions. And besides that, you asked about the driving. They did not drive until recently. I would say like maybe 5 years ago, 8 years ago, they
Mm-hmm.
decided women could drive. Um, the driving wasn't a big deal for me because I had my own chauffeur. So wouldn't you rather just jump in the back seat of a limo and
Yeah.
have somebody drive you around? Yes, sir. Yes, Amity. Yes, madam. It was fun. And I'd pick up all my friends and we could go around to wherever we wanted to go. You don't walk in the streets there. Women were not allowed to walk in the streets. A policeman could come up to you and pull his belt out and whip you if he decided that you shouldn't be doing this. So you didn't go in the streets. But
Mm.
who needed to go in the streets? It was like 115 degrees out.
Yeah.
So you would get in your car, get driven from your estate or your enclave, whatever you want to call it, your little house with a gate around it, and you'd be driven to your friend's place, and then you'd hang out there at her swimming pool, or we'd go, you went from place to place, house to house. So that was
Mhm.
the life there. But there was a lot of traveling involved too. I got to travel all over the world with him. We went to Hawaii, we went to the Middle East, we went, Lebanon, Egypt, Cairo, South Africa, Morocco, Italy, France, I mean, everywhere.
Yeah.
So the traveling was fun. The part in Saudi was, tough. The ladies were very meek and mild-mannered, most of them. Even the foreign ladies were pretty meek and mild. I was considered like the wild one. And they all wanted to come with me because I would, it was fun. I had a pool and I would have like disco music playing at our pool. And we had a disco room where we could dance. It was like, I didn't mind it that much. I think there were, it wasn't so bad. But I was not allowed to work. That bothered me because I actually, even though my mom never worked, I always thought I would work. I like work. I was a good student. I like work. I like sitting at a desk. I like doing work. I get bored with too much play. So I wanted to work. I wanted to be an interior designer. Couldn't do it. So that was a source of contention. It upset me to think that I couldn't do this, but you couldn't. So I put up with it. But anyway, the lucky thing about the marriage, because it did get a little strained in when we lived in Saudi Arabia the first few years, my ex-husband decided he wanted to go to law school, and he applied to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and he got in. So now I was going to, Georgetown and living in Washington, D.C., and he strung out the law degree for 6 years. We got to live there, and that was a lot of fun. So that was, I did live in Saudi for several years. I wrote a lot about it in the book. There were some horrific things that I witnessed, like I saw a lady being stoned to death, and I watched from across the street. She had committed adultery. I went to a funeral for distant cousins where the husband had killed his wife and 2 children by strangling them with electric cord and then plugging it in and electrocuting them. And at the funeral, there were all relatives. And why did he kill her? She had committed adultery. And why did he kill the 2 children? Well, he said they probably weren't his anyway. So he did not get arrested for that because a man in Saudi is sovereign over his wife and children. Even his own parents, nobody can tell him what to do with his wife and children. So it was a very, very, very strict, rigid place. I sort of avoided getting. One time I went to a beach with my husband's cousin. They had a private beach with 12-foot walls, gatekeeper, a little house, and a beach with a dock. So we went there, the 2 of us. We put on bathing suits, and we were swimming in the Red Sea. And the gatekeeper saw us, and he wanted to rape us because we must have been whores. We must have been prostitutes because we were swimming in bathing suits. And our chauffeur, who acts also as a bodyguard, had a fist fight with him, and it looked like maybe we were going to lose the fist fight, and we were locking ourselves in the car, and it was actually very scary. But we did get out of there, and we dented the car on the way out through the gate and got home and got in big trouble. And I learned never go to the beach again with one lady because it's too dangerous. So there were a lot of weird things that I witnessed while I was there, and a lot of even weirder stories that I heard about things that happened in the town. I could not verify them. Maybe they were rumors, maybe they were truth. All kinds of stories about men raping their housekeepers, and the housekeepers get pregnant and then they're found drowned in the water tank on the roof, and crazy stories. I don't know if they were true or not, but it was scary. So when my ex-husband said we're moving and we're going to live in Georgetown, I was delighted. And I thought, okay, now I'm, disco and the jet set life 24/7. And so I also, noticed that wherever we went, people were interested in us. It was a very unusual couple. People met us. They'd ask, oh, have you met Patricia and Rahman? Oh my God, they're so cool. So there were a lot of positives about being married to him. I think the one negative was that he got into a lot of alcohol and drugs, and he was a cheater. He was a cheater, and it got worse and worse. Women threw themselves at him. So wherever we went, there was a balance. This is good, this is bad. And in Saudi, I had to deal with certain things. When we were in the West, I had to deal with others. And the marriage, it was never easy.
Yeah.
So that's that.
We're talking with Patricia Bonis. Her book, JEDDAH Bride, and it's her memoir. It's a life of luxury, love, and sacrifice. JEDDAH Bride reveals the high-stakes drum behind the veil of Saudi Arabia's wealthiest families as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan here with Patricia Bonis, and Patricia, I want to ask you. I mean, there's so many things, so many different directions that we could go in this conversation, but I am curious as this program dives into your spiritual life. How you were obviously born and raised here in the States under a particular philosophy, possibly, or maybe none. I know that Saudi Arabia, if I am correct, and I think that sheiks are under, they're not Muslim. That's a whole different thing. Tell me a little bit about your spiritual walk prior to and then after this relationship, and then where you are today.
Okay. So I was raised Catholic, but I didn't like the strictness of it. Okay. I never went to Catholic school. I would have killed myself. I would have run away from home if my parents ever tried to force me into Catholic school because it was way too restrictive for me. So I was Catholic. We went to church on Christmas and on Easter. And we did all our, like baptism and Holy Communion and all that. But we weren't super religious Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have, my parents, we didn't really like divorce. In fact, there was a point in time where my parents didn't really want me to be friends with kids whose parents were divorced because maybe my mom felt that if I go to their house, who knows what's going on there. I don't know. There was some suspicion about divorced people. So that was very conservative. For me, of course, I didn't agree with all those restrictive ideas, but I was raised that way.
Mm-hmm.
We were never necessarily told to, if we get married, well, first of all, you're never going to live with a guy. You're never going to do any of that because that's disgusting. That's a sin. You have to get married. But I think my parents wouldn't have been that comfortable if I'd married someone who wasn't Christian. Jewish and Muslim and Buddhist included in that other category. They preferred that I be married to a Christian guy. And I guess it's because they felt that there would be shared values with that other Christian person. But when I met my future husband, Rahman, I knew he was Muslim. I briefly actually took a course in Islam in college just so I could get the hang of it. And I understood that there was a lot of similarity, believe it or not. Today, it's not hard. It's not easy to see that because there's so much politicization of the politicization of the Islamic religion. But at the time in the 80s, it was just a plain old simple religion, and it was based off of Judaism and Christianity. There's one God. There are prophets. They believe in Jesus, but not as a God, but as a prophet. They believe in Moses. They believe in, Abraham. They believe in the Ten Commandments. They believe all of that. So the religion started in the year 612. And a prophet, Muhammad, who they do not consider a God, they consider him like Moses, a prophet, went to the Middle East, which was, lived in the Middle East, primarily a pagan area. So they were just worshiping rocks and stones and sky and lightning. And he went through the Middle East and very quickly whipped them into being Muslims with a Quran, which is like our Bible, or which is like, the Jewish Talmud or whatever, you have. So the rules are very similar. Christians have Sunday as their sacred day. Jews have Saturday as their sacred day, and Muslims have Friday as their Sabbath sacred day. They go to a temple, they go to a church, they go to a mosque. It's the same going there and gathering. It's so many similar rituals, and I kind of felt comfortable with it. Everybody respected me. Rahman's family respected me as a Christian. They didn't have any problem with a Christian. And I thought and there were ladies married into the family, into friends that were Christians, and they were treated, they're Christians. They were accepted, and that's that. They were very comfortable with that. However, at the time that we had to get married, the king of Saudi Arabia, King Faisal, decided that there were too many foreign girls coming in, marrying Arabs, Saudis, And he said he would not give us permission to get married because you had to get permission from the government to bring a foreign woman in as your wife. I had to become a Muslim. That was his stipulation. So my fiance at the time called me and said, I've got bad news. King Faisal said we can only have a permission to get married if you become a Muslim. And I was like, he goes, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. I'll set you up in an apartment in London and we can be there. And I'm thinking, well, number one, my parents will kill me. They'll disown me. They'll lose my whole family. And number two, he'll probably get married to some woman in Saudi Arabia and have kids with her because they match them, and if he's not married, they're going to find him a woman. So I'm like, wait a minute, that's like a lose-lose situation for me. I don't need to have an apartment in London. I can't even work in England. I mean, if I'm in America, I just didn't. I said, no, okay. I said, let me see if I can figure out how to convert. So I went to a mosque and I said, I want to convert. And they made it very easy. They gave me a list of prayers I had to memorize in Arabic. And within a week, I'd memorized them. I went back. I demonstrated the prayer. When you go down, you go up, and you recite the prayer. And I did it correctly. And they gave me papers that says I was a Muslim. So I sent them to my fiance, and he showed them to the government, and they approved our marriage. So now I was officially a Muslim. And I didn't mind. I was still the same Patricia, and it didn't bother me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not so much of an identity in those days. Today, it's like a political statement, almost, if whatever your religion is. At the time, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I even went to Mecca, which is forbidden to any non-Muslim. And in my book, I describe it with an entire chapter. It was shockingly spiritual for me to see this stone, this black stone. It was like a meteorite or something, and it had fallen to the earth. And it wasn't Islam during the time of Islam that it fell onto the earth. It was in prehistoric times, and pagan people from all over the world would go there and worship this stone. And I don't know, it was like a black shiny metal, like obsidian or something, or I don't know what it was, but it maybe came from outer space, and it was it was really shocking. It gave me the most unearthly universe awareness of like other planets and God and life and eternity and the universe, and we're human beings on this little planet. It was a really intense feeling when I went there and circling around it, like the way planets always circle around their sun. And it was probably the most extraordinary thing I've ever done. I never went back. I just went on one pilgrimage, and to see all these people doing it. And it was from before, like prehistoric times, they were coming there to worship this thing, not worship it, to worship their God with this as inspiration. That's kind of how I describe it. The Rock isn't like a precious thing. It's a place where you feel the spirituality of our lives as human beings on this planet. And it really spoke to me. I loved it. It was very mystical. So that was an enjoyable thing that I unfortunately never got to repeat. And then, when the religion thing never really entered into our lives because my husband wasn't really religious either. So we just kind of lived our merry lives until I caught him cheating during the marriage, and I really caught him. And he suddenly said, instead of saying, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again, please forgive me, he said, I'm a Muslim and I can marry 4 women. And so too bad. I'll do what I want. And that was my rude awakening. I was like, what? I never heard you talk like this. We've been together for like 10 years. I don't even know who are you? And after that, I filed for divorce because I saw that he was really changing, and it could have been all that money corrupting him. It could have been getting into a certain time in his life, older. He was like in his 30s. I don't know. I'm not his psychiatrist, but it got scary. And that's actually when I filed for divorce, when I realized that this Islam thing is coming back to haunt me, because they are allowed 4 wives.
We're talking with Patricia Bonis. Her book, her memoir, actually, is called JEDDAH Bride. And I'm Richard Dugan, and you are listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. JEDDAH Bride with Patricia Bonis. And by the way, the website that I want you to go to check out the book as well, and I am pretty certain it's available on Amazon and other outlets. PatriciaBonisAuthor.com will be linked to that website. That's again PatriciaBonisAuthor.com. The title, and I know you've been asked this question on every interview you've probably done. And I will tell you that when you were talking about all of this in terms of the leading up to the divorce, what I heard in my ear was, "This is not the husband you are looking for." How did you come up with JEDDAH Bride?
JEDDAH Bride. You're the first one that asked me that.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and I love the question because I actually one podcaster asked me to give questions that I would like to be asked, and that was one of them. What is the meaning of JEDDAH Bride, and why did you choose it as your title? And I'll explain. I chose it as my title. I looked at several options. Some of them had more of an action, like having to do with deceived, or losing, being a loser, like tragedy, something like that. But I decided I didn't want that. I decided JEDDAH Bride is 2 words. It's a little mysterious. I am the JEDDAH Bride. What is the JEDDAH Bride? The JEDDAH Bride is like kind of anonymous when I was there, kind of anonymous, kind of powerless. You're a bride. You're not a person. You're a bride. You're somebody else's possession.
Mm.
And a lot of women are like that. And I kind of wanted to emphasize that, what happened to me as a JEDDAH bride. Because it wouldn't have happened to me if it was a different bride. This happened because I was a JEDDAH bride. I lost my children after the divorce. I didn't get to speak to them again. I really couldn't. I couldn't drive there. I couldn't work there. Yes, I could do all kinds of other fluffy things, but you're powerless. And a powerful person, and I think I am, became powerless there. So I was a JEDDAH bride. That's why I named it JEDDAH Bride. That's what it means to me.
Well, I know too that writing about one's life associated with certain groups of people down through history has gotten some folks into a lot of trouble. As a matter of fact, the first person that I thought of as I was looking through the book and looking through the materials and so forth was Salman Rushdie, who went on a went on a list. As far as I know, he's still on the list. And Satanic Verses was the title of his book. And what I found fascinating was, by comparison to the author's last name is Kazantzakis, and he wrote The Last Temptation of Christ. And back in the 80s, early 90s, when that book came out, and then, of course, there was a movie made of it, the Christians in this country, because I was working for that Christian station during that period of time, went berserk, thinking that, oh my God, this is blasphemous, etc., etc. And my first thought was, you do realize that the more attention you give to this by complaining about it, the more. And I actually bought the book, and I did see the movie. Not a great movie. I'm a believer. I wasn't offended, because at the beginning, in the preface of that book, he says, Kazantzakis, "These are just my musings." Now, I paraphrase, but he says, "These are just my musings." Did you ever have any concern over talking about your relationship and all of the various dynamics and living in, not only in Saudi Arabia, but living in a Muslim household and all of these other things? Was that ever a concern to you?
That at the time when I was there, did I ever have any concerns?
No, writing the book.
Or now
writing
do I
the
have?
book.
Right now, do I have concerns? Okay, yes, but I'm a risk taker.
Okay.
Obviously, I think I proved that. No, I actually, at the beginning, I talk about it in the book, when my children were first kidnapped by their dad and brought to Saudi Arabia. I was so deathly afraid that I too would be either killed or kidnapped. I used to, sometimes I would hear noises in my house. I would hide under the bed with a bed skirt so you couldn't see that I was under there. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd fall asleep and wake up under the bed in the morning. I was really scared. But nobody did kidnap me. And eventually I realized that I have nothing to be worried about. I did have a few moments of fear when I decided to write a book. I waited till my in-laws had passed because believe it or not, out of some kind of respect for them,
Mm-hmm.
I just, I don't know. I was finished with the book, but they were very old. They thought, okay, I don't have a publisher, so I'll keep trying to get a publisher. But when my in-laws died, I thought, okay, I'm really going to step it up now because I didn't want to upset them. Am I upset? Am I worried about upsetting my ex-husband? I don't, you know what? What am I going to do? I don't care. If somebody comes and shoots me, okay, whatever. I had a good life. I'm not gonna. I decided I wanted to talk about it. I want to tell people what happened. I want to bring attention to the one thing that really annoys me. When my children were kidnapped, and they were kidnapped out of the state of Florida. I was living in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and I was forced by an American judge to give my ex-husband unsupervised visitation with his children. The reason why? Well, they said he's never really kidnapped anyone before, so we can't really assume he'll kidnap somebody.
Right.
Within 1 hour of unsupervised visitation, they were on a plane to Saudi Arabia, to Jeddah, and I didn't see them for 14 years. So I feel that we have, and I studied this, I had to hire at great cost to myself. I had to sell things. I had to, I had to sell my house to get the money to pay for international lawyers to fight to get my children back, and nothing worked. 14 years went by with no success. And I basically feel that our country does very little I mean, my children were Americans. They'd never been out of the country. They were Americans. And they were taken to a country like Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is not signatory to the Hague Convention, which is the only law that exists for international child abduction cases. Saudi Arabia didn't sign. I wish I knew these things. See, I didn't know these things when I had these children. And there's nothing that can be done. I mean, we've had so many situations since then with the hostages being held in Iran and hostages in Gaza now today. There's a lot of situations where Americans are being held hostage somewhere and there's nothing America does. And that to me, I want to bring attention to that.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what, I'm going to tell this story. A lot of women, and there's another thing, there's a lot of fantasy, and I was in the fantasy big time. A lot of fantasies about culture's all the same, and we're all the same, and everything's all the same. There's a lot of difference between cultures. And you have to realize that. If you're going to do it, go in, but go in with information. Don't just do it. I just jumped in without even knowing what I was doing. But it was a different time. It was a different time. And I'd never met anyone like that. But today there's, with the world the way it is, people traveling everywhere and going and, I decided I wanted to bring attention to this and really discuss it, and so that's sort of why I overcame my fears about going public with this. And actually, it was funny. I thought there would be anger on the part of some of the people because I did kind of go heavy on the ladies that I had become friends with in Saudi. And when my children were there without me, when they were kidnapped, I would beg them. I would write letters and make phone calls to all these ladies that were my friends, relatives of my ex-husband, and foreign ladies that were married to other Saudis. And I said, please, please, if you're in a birthday party with your child and there's a birthday cake and they're blowing out the candles and the kids are all standing around, can you snap a picture of your kid and my kid and just circle my kid so I'll know which one it is? I haven't seen my kids in years. I don't know what they look like. I never knew. I still don't know. What did my children look like at age 8? What did my children look like at age 12? I don't know this. Nobody would send me a picture. They were all too scared. They were all too scared. And I thought when the book came out, you know, we were in the Daily Mail and it circulates first in London in the morning. On a Sunday morning after that article came out, by 6 a.m., I was getting texts and emails and from all these people in London that knew me back then. And they were saying, oh my God, we read the article. We had no idea. A lot of them didn't have any idea that I hadn't seen the children in so long. They just forgot about the whole situation and didn't get involved. And they were all saying, could you send us an autographed copy of your book? And I was, oh, they're not angry at me. All these people, I kind of criticized them for not helping me. I said things about them in the book. I kind of revealed some of their stuff in the book, but they're not angry. So I don't know. I think maybe my ex-husband's the only one who's angry. And forget him. I don't care.
You've moved on. You've moved on. What about your relationship with your children today?
Well, I see them. My daughter lives in New York. She came to live in New York City, and she was working for the United Nations, and she rides horses. I ride horses too, so we do that together. We were at the same barn in New York. She's down here in Florida right now for the jumping season. In fact, she just texted me. So we're very close. My son chose to remain in Saudi. He took over his dad's business, and I don't blame him. And it's a very thriving business. They import all the food into the Middle East, and they have shipping lines and supermarkets and all kinds of things. So he's running the business. He lives between London and Europe and, you know, the United States and Saudi. So he lives that international life, and we do see each other and talk, and it's fine. Both of them, I asked them before I said, I'm writing a book. What do you think? And my son immediately, because he's a guy, he's not afraid. He said, well, it's your story to tell. So, okay, good. My daughter was a little scared. She's like, what? Eyes wide open. What do you mean? And I said, look, Sultana, I really want to write it. I do. I really want to bring this out in the open and, you know, talk about it. And I said, look, I'll change some of the names. And I did. I changed some of the sensitive names to something similar, but not the same. And I wanted to also mention that one of the things I'm doing right now in conjunction with my book is I've joined the board of Find My Parent, which is one of the only international organizations, it's an NGO, that tries actively to broker deals with countries like, for example, Japan. Japan has signed the Hague Convention, but they don't really enforce it. If a Japanese person, male or female, has a half American child, they go to Japan, and Japan will keep that child there in spite of the fact that they signed the treaty. There are some countries that enforce it partially, some that are willing to enforce it and send the child back within a few months. But Find My Parent is working actively and it's hard because every country is sovereign. And that is one of the things that I'm hoping I can make a difference with.
Want to ask you, what was the hardest part of this book for you to write? The most difficulty in putting down into words?
I don't want to cry because there are parts of the book that really bother me. And I was working with my editor, and I didn't even realize how much it still bothers me. It's like a raw thing that's never going to go away. One of the chapters was when I was really forced, after everything, fighting for a whole year with the courts, trying to make it that I wouldn't have to give them up for visitation, unsupervised visitation. And I was driving to the airport, and I can remember that day like it happened yesterday. And I'm looking at my children, my 2-year-old daughter, who had just started talking, and my son, who was 4, and he just was so loving me, and we were like kindred spirits. I would say something and he would complete the sentence. Like, I think there was some genetic thing that we were like the same. And I was looking at them as I'm driving, and they were going to visit their dad with the British nanny that we had hired to take care of them. And I remember I just had this deep feeling that this is the last time I'm going to see them. And
Mm.
I was trying to stall it, get to the airport, walk slower, get some ice cream. You know, in the old days, you could walk up to the gate. This was
Yeah.
in 1989. And if I had to read it, I would start crying.
Mm.
That's the first part, the hardest part to write. But my editor really worked with me to really explain it and put a lot of detail into it. The other part that's really hard, and I also cry every time I read it. I can. In fact, actually, my daughter, I have a third child from my second marriage, and my daughter Amanda, who's American, she's an actress. She's a voice actress, and so she does audible books. She's hired to do books and things like that,
Mm.
cartoons and anime and dubbing. And she just completed the audible book, and she said that she even cried when she read this part. At
Wow.
the end of the book, the epilogue, I described um, about 10 years ago. This was long after I'd again gotten reunited with my children and everything. My ex-father-in-law asked if we could come to London, I and my daughter Amanda, to meet with the whole family to have a lunch. And I thought, okay, out of respect, my kids, I was back with my kids. I felt like, okay, I'll do it. So we went to London and we met, and he got up in the middle of the lunch and made a speech. And although my ex-husband had been telling the children, you know, your mother is a silly woman. And at one point, when I said, how can you be raising them without a mother? And he said, I'm their mother. Like, he was so idiotic. It was actually pathetic. Anyway, my father-in-law was the true patriarch of the family, and everyone looked up to him. And he got up and in front of everyone, he said, I want to recognize Patricia. The reason we're here today is to celebrate Patricia as the mother of Kareem and Sultana. Those were my two kids. She's a wonderful woman. She's an intelligent woman. We were proud that he married her, that we're proud to have her in our family. We're proud of, he just went on and on and on. And he said everyone should respect her and know that she's the mother of Kareem and Sultana. And she'll always be dear to me. She's my daughter. And I have a picture of her next to my bedside table with all my children and all my grandchildren. And Patricia is my daughter. And her daughter, Amanda, is my granddaughter. And you're part of our family. And you deserve respect. So he validated what my ex-husband had been negating all those years.
Yeah.
And I kind of explored how to feel. And, you know, it felt good, but it wasn't getting those 14 years back with where I didn't know. It was good, but a little late, you know, but it was good for my kids to hear that.
Yeah.
And it was good for my daughter Amanda to understand that, because I've tried to show her that certain cultures, they're very rigid. That's how Saudi is. It's a very rigid culture, but they love you. They'll almost kill you, but they kill you out of love.
Kill you with kindness. Yeah.
Yeah. They won't, they'll punish you, but they'll love you anyway. And they'll say, that was what we had to do. They really follow these strict old rules. And maybe there's that in every old culture. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that my parents weren't like strict, you know, Christians. Were they? I don't know, kill. I don't know. It's a hard religion. It's a hard culture, and it's very old and harsh.
JEDDAH Bride, a memoir by Patricia Bonis. PatriciaBonisAuthor.com is the website. And you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. Patricia Bonis, I want to thank you so much for being a part of what we're doing here to try to open the eyes of people to all kinds of different perspectives on the world, and especially understanding that everybody has a right to be here. We may not like what they do, and you can certainly attest to that. But at the same time, hey, they're doing their thing just like we're doing our thing. We don't have to like them, but we have to recognize and accept the fact that we all We all are here, and we're all trying to do the best we can. And the thing that really gets me, especially today, you talked about Islam being politicized. And of course, there's this huge uproar over Sharia law and their fears over Muslims taking over different cities and towns and states and so forth and instituting this. And I'm sitting here going, I don't know why you're afraid of their Sharia law because you're already instituting yours, but you just don't realize it because you can't see the forest for the trees. And it's a real interesting dichotomy from my perspective. But I want to thank you for taking, I'll put it this way, taking the risk, putting yourself out there. You said you were a risk taker. And I thank you for doing that and being a part of what we're doing here.
Well, I thank you too. This was really enjoyable. Your questions were great, and you gave me a chance to explain very thoroughly my thoughts on myself and on what I've done and on JEDDAH Bride. I hope people read it and they will have a guideline from this interview of what to look for in the book.
Absolutely. I hope they will pick up a copy going to patriciabonisauthor.com. And like I said before, we will be linked to that. I do have three final questions that I ask all of my guests at the end of our program. But before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times, all 9 of those times, at richarddugan.com, with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. I hope you'll subscribe and click notifications so that when I post a new conversation, well, of course, you'll be notified. Choices, 5 Steps for Life is available. It's on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, as well as Kindle. The Audible, I'm working on it. We're getting it all recorded. I'm finishing up the recording and editing, and I will be letting you know when that is available. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we would be gratefully appreciative. To those who have helped and to those who will help, thank you, thank you, thank you. Just put my email address in if they should ask for it. Richard@richarddugan.com. That's Richard@richarddugan.com. And finally, take some time during the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, and go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. We go now to our final 3 questions for our very special guest. That first question is, who is Patricia Bonis?
Who is Patricia Bonis? I've never answered that. Patricia Bonis is a woman who is an American, more than I ever realized. And I am a person who has tried to make my life meaningful to myself, for myself, and meaningful as a human being on this earth. And I've pursued at great expense my dream, and I'm happy I did. That's who I am.
What gets you up in the morning?
My life. I love my life. I love everything I do. I want to live another day. I love living. I love people. I love everything around me. If I don't like it, I fight to get rid of it. And I get up because I have many things to do in my mind that I'm dying to start.
And finally, what was your best day
of my life? Oh my God, the day I found my son.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing today on this program. And we look forward to having you back again to continue this conversation. I know there's a lot more to talk about and the things that you've experienced. And I've always been curious about the experiences that people from this country have had in other countries, whether in your case it be Saudi Arabia or many of those other countries you listed that you've visited, and sort of comparing notes and realizing we're all the same. We all love our families. We all are looking for community. Yeah, there might be a matriarchal or patriarchal system going on, or maybe nothing along those lines. Maybe it's more balanced, which would be nice. But it's just fascinating to learn about the other cultures and the way that they think and they believe and they feel and they live and work and play together. So I hope we can have that opportunity down the road.
That would be great. And I love the way you think. It's wonderful. Thank you
Uh,
so much for sharing so many of your thoughts.
Oh,
And
you are
now I have something to ponder. Thank you.
well. Thank you, and I thank you, folks, for listening to and watching. Tell Me Your Story: New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.